Dr. Kimberly McGlonn is an award-winning social entrepreneur and thought leader in social justice and environmentalism, featured in publications like Fast Company, Essence, as well as Vogue, and funded by Beyonce's Be Good Foundation. She's received visas. She's next in Fashions Award, Black Enterprises Business Disruptor of the Year Award in 2022, named one of Philadelphia's 150 most influential Philadelphians in 2023 and 2024. She inspires creative entrepreneurs to integrate social and environmental consciousness into their work. Her book, Build It Boldly, offers insights for gaining influence and creating impact. Please welcome Dr. Kimberly McGlonn. So, Philadelphia.
Yeah.
I used to be in Philadelphia. I was there for a couple of years. Philadelphia is an amazing town, steeped with incredible history. One of my good friends is a social entrepreneur there and works in the area of criminal justice. And there's so much great work in Philadelphia. Give us some background of, how you kind of got started. What was, I asked Sasha, when she was 6 years old, how did she make a decision that she wanted to be a climber? From your journey in life, what was the salient moment that you all of a sudden just realized, look, I want to be an author. I want to lead people. I want to build things. I want to be a difference maker. What was that moment?
It actually started in the classroom. So I was an English teacher for 20 years, and I taught a course in colonialism, and I taught a course in marginalization, the American story. And it was spending time with teenagers that really got me to thinking about, what are we going to do with this one precious life? What is the biggest, boldest thing that we could set up for ourselves, and in terms of thinking about our legacies and making sure that our journeys are creating value for other people. And so for me, that's where it started. It was over literature. It was in books.
And then you wrote one, Build It Bold.
And then I wrote one.
you gotta tell us, when you first sat down, a lot of times when people write books, they think it's easy, right? Then all of a sudden, you stare at these blank pieces of paper and you have to fill it with something that people want to read. What were some of the moments that you realized that needed to be on that piece of paper that motivated you to keep writing, and at the same time allowed so many people to be motivated by the work that you did in your book?
I think it's two things. I think for everyone in this audience today, every one of you has a story that has such a unique angle for people that come from where you come from, and that will resonate with them. And I wish more people had the temerity to think that their stories mattered enough to be documented, because they do. I think for me, it was honoring the stories of my parents and my grandparents, and also thinking about my journey as an entrepreneur. The book is about 70% how do we build brands, how do we step into bolder leadership in ways that responds with more audacity to what we're all experiencing in terms of the natural world and the political world and the needs of our local communities. And I think the first 30% is just what about my life set me up to think that way. So it's a vulnerable tale of my childhood in the north side of Milwaukee. And I think that idea of coming to the page day after day, processing all of that journey taught me. It was partly about, my own healing, I think, in retrospect, but I think most of it was we don't learn how to build bold businesses. Most of us, those of us, and I have a PhD versus an MBA, but most MBA programs are really centered in, what do we do to pursue profit at all costs? And I think that we're in a time of such urgency that businesses have to think about people and the planet too. And so this book aimed to be a roadmap for how I approach doing that.
Is there a misconception or one that you think that people have when it comes to running a purpose-driven company?
That it can't be done. Or that maybe it's like the returns, because we have to think about measuring them in maybe sometimes unusual, nuanced ways, that it's not worth the climb. And so, Sasha talked a lot about the challenges of the climb. And I wish that more people understood yet, yes, building a brand that seeks to do good in the world, there are invariably unique challenges. The surfing of that wave is completely different. But I think the returns, both quantitative and qualitative, are much richer. And I think it's a real exciting place to work, companies that are thinking about that. And building those are really exciting too. So I think one of the misconceptions is that it can't be done. And I would argue that it absolutely can and it must.
Do you think about a company that you see out there, or one model that you see by a company that you think is the one that people should look towards and spend more time thinking about and maybe modeling their own businesses around?
Oh, so many. I think about, I love what Ben & Jerry's does, how they're able to, while Unilever acquired that company, and so some of the things that the original founders set out to do have, we've gotten away from that, but the original origin story of a company like Ben & Jerry's is there. I think about a smaller company in Philadelphia, Down North Pizza, which is in the food industry, and thinking about how to work with folks who've come home from prison and teach them what it means to be a chef and the ways in which we can create community in kitchens. So I think in every one of our sectors, there are brands that we can look to as pioneers for what the future might hold. And I think that there are local stories, even within Denver, of people who are doing, just really audacious things to try to show up in responsible ways with what it is that we're all seeing, feeling, facing.
So I see sort of this path and the book that you created on the thoughts that you have. One of the things that I've found is, being a bold leader, as many of us are, is that you get knocked down quickly off of a pedestal, because a lot of times people don't want the bold leader to be up there. Everybody wants everybody to kind of fall into the pack. So when you think about building boldly, right, and being an audacious leader and being at the front, or maybe your mentality is lead from the back, how do you deal with those that are trying to knock you off of your path, knock you off of the height that you've reached, and continue on?
I think I learned, for me, it's about really staying anchored in my why. And I think that in one way, there's many days where I feel really big. I feel like I can do anything. There are a lot of days I feel really small, and like the things that I do, in the larger narrative arc of human history, who knows how much they matter. But I know for me, I feel so much, I find so much strength and joy and pleasure and pride in knowing that I've continued to align my due north with the common good. And I think we've gotten so far away from thinking about, what is really in the best interest of us all. And for me, that really is so tied to the work that we're doing, gathering to think about even the natural world and outside. It's really, how do we continue day after day, despite the challenges, to reorient our gaze towards what's yet possible. And I think for me, building a real firm shield around my optimism has allowed me to, overcome odds that I think are like many of the odds you all faced, unusual and incredible.
Is there someone that you look up towards? Is there a board that you created that you all of a sudden sort of always go back to in any times and any moment of doubt? Because if you think about the entrepreneurs, you want to build a business, right? And as I said before, you get knocked off, right? But you need people to go back to you. I think about myself. One of my friends told me when I retired, he said, look, you have to build your own personal board of directors.
That's right.
If you sort of, here I'll say it like this, without a mirror, you wouldn't know what you look like. Think about that. Right? You wouldn't know what you look like unless someone told you, right? So if there was no mirrors and there were just people, they would be your greatest reflection, right? So the board reflects who you are as a person. So do you have a board that you work with that keeps you strong, that keeps you on this path? Or what do you build in order to make sure that you do stay grounded in your direction?
It's a beautiful and very important question. For me, I think about surrounding myself with a diversity of voices. There are people who've spent a lot of time in prison. They are people who have overcome such unusual circumstances that they add perspective. They're dear friends of mine. My oldest friend, I'd like to say, she's 78. And so I have an intergenerational perspective to my journey, this idea of people who've gone ahead and before. I have friends who identify as trans. I have friends who are pioneers in industry. Todd Carmichael, who built La Colombe, he's a dear friend of mine. Surrounding myself with voices of other pioneers is really priceless. I think we really have to think about, what are where are the places we can go to round out our own sense of perspective so that we can actually approach anything with the spirit of innovation. And one thing I've learned is having that symphony of different voices has really done a different kind of job in working out the perch I sit on and the place I come from. And I look at the past too. There are remarkable people whose writing I turn to, whose philosophies I appreciate, that I think help me to understand that, the thing that I'm seeking to do, which is to build a life that my daughter's proud of, that people in Milwaukee, where I come from, are proud of, that it means I have to really create a round, wide table and not just anchor only my perspective in every single seat. And I think that for a lot of us, when we don't do that, we fall short of our own potential, not because it's not within us, but because we trapped ourselves in a room and didn't create any mirrors that actually could show a different way of even seeing who we are, you know?
See how she did that? See how she did that? Woo! Give her a round of applause on that. You see how she did that? Whoa! Okay. You know, in the book you talk about building businesses rooted in justice. How has that principle guided your work with Grant Boulevard?
So I'm from Philly, right? And I was coming over here to the library today and I passed the Supreme Court office and it says with liberty and justice for all. Anybody see that? Look at that over there, right? And I think that we take these principles for granted. Like we as children, we were kind of told to say them, but we weren't really taught to appreciate both what they mean in our daily lives and the need to defend them. And I think that for me, thinking about those who are really in the floorboards of this story, that's been, in my experience, women, disproportionately women of color who have a history of conviction, the odds that they have to overcome really has helped to widen my aperture for understanding ultimately what we all are seeking to pursue, which is greater liberty and greater sense of access and opportunity and of what might yet, be on our own horizon. And so for me, thinking about, in my first company, Grant Boulevard, how we could work with women who come home from prison, how we could create learning experiences for them in the creative economy, how we could, expose them to things like yoga and financial literacy. Those are ways that I learned to sharpen my own sensibility around, what it means to take care of myself, and take care of my neighbors, and take care of people who live in my city. So I think that idea of thinking about justice and liberty is one that we all have to get to the front line on. The idea that we will all experience it, enjoy those things, it's dependent on our commitment to defending them.
Do you have a story about one of the young ladies or those that you've worked with and how it was transformative in the way that you worked with them?
One of the things that comes to mind is we ended our work week in our studio with a yoga practice, brought in a world-renowned yoga practitioner, Jean-Jacques Gabriel, and to see women who hadn't had any experience with yoga really discover their bodies, to rest together. We live in a culture that tells us so often that we're not enough, that nothing that we do is enough, that the work that we produce isn't enough, and that oftentimes leaves us really anxious about resting. And so to be with women who have experienced so much anxiety and to just watch them fall into the floor, into their own bodies, and to see their reactions to being able to surrender to the physicality of being alive was really remarkable. And I think that that's one of the things that I think we can do as bold leaders is we can create workplaces where this centering our own wellness, the wellness of our employees, gets recentered.
So you have Grant Boulevard, you have your book, you worked in the fashion world. What haven't you done?
I can't sing.
I mean, you got named 150 most influential people in Philadelphia. I mean, it's a tremendous honor. But do you rest? Do you personally rest, or where do you find your energy to accomplish the goals and work in the fields of which you have done for so long, as well as become a doctor?
That came first. That was a long time ago. I think for me it's that trifecta that I hope more of us turn towards, of silence and solitude and stillness. And that's something that we can enjoy and really in every room that we're in as we kind of cultivate our own relationship with ourselves and being able to hear ourselves and turn on the volume of our own thoughts. That's really helpful to me. I have a daughter, she just turned 17. And we do an annual girls trip where we go away and there's no TV. We just try to sit out. We've gone to Sweden and Denmark and the Bahamas, and we really take time to just be richly with each other, richly present with each other. So I think that, particularly for those of us, how many of you guys are parents or taking care of parents? If you're on either side of that journey, that idea of really discovering radical presence is as a way of orient your lifestyle, as it were, towards greater wellness. And so, I do all those things. I work with remarkable people and I have incredible teams. And around that time of being with them, I've learned to really be with myself. And that has sustained me in all kinds of storms and seas.
So I imagine on these trips with your daughter, you talk about, the future that she holds and the value-driven businesses that she'll create one day, and following the footsteps of her great mother.
How do you think about entrepreneurs, and how do you think we should think about value-driven businesses, and what advice, or what one or two things should we take away if we don't read the entire book? But
Which you will. It's gotten great reviews. I would say the first thing is that we have to believe that they're possible. I think the first stage of creating a new reality of any kind of futuristic thinking is the belief that an alternative is possible. When we surrender that, then we reduce the likelihood of their arrival. And I think in order to do that, we're going to have to really double down on protecting our own optimism. Frederick Douglass once said that pessimism was a tool of dark forces. He used the language precisely of oppressive forces. And I think this idea that we really have to hold our own shields around our optimism as we face the changing climate, as we face all other kinds of shifts and instability. People are watching us, your teams are watching you, your children are watching you. You need to really double down on your belief that better is possible. We have to protect our optimism.
Build boldly is a powerful call to action. What's your hope for the next generation of builders and dreamers?
My hope for them is that they are become really aware of their inheritances in terms of the culture of work, the culture of corporations, the culture of business, and I hope that they lead with much more tenderness, that while they pursue a beautiful quality of life and travel and incredible food and rich friendships, that they do all of that with the spirit of tenderness, that they build companies and company cultures where people feel heard and seen and safe, and where the pursuit of the delivery of services or the development of products, that they don't exploit people in ways that are cruel, and that they don't deny that our planet needs our time, our attention, and all of our talents.
Dr. Kimberly McGlonn, give a round of applause.